Hello, listeners. This is Kat, and welcome back to Put Your Hands Up Podfics. This will be the continuation of Complicated Creation. This will be part 14, the second half to chapter 10. UA is everything Izuku ever dreamed of, and also kind of terrifying. Aizawa offers him a room in the dorms with the other first-year students, and Izuku instantly says no to that. That's too much. He's not a student, and he's not a hero, and he'd stick out like a sore thumb. He considers the offer to just stay in the apartment with Present Mike, but he doesn't really know him, not really. And it feels too much like he'll be interfering and just be a pain. He doesn't want to cause trouble. The compromise is a room next to Eri's, next to the infirmary. Aizawa warns him he'll probably hear a lot because the hero school employs someone like Recovery Girl for a reason, but Izuku reminds him he's stayed in rented rooms for a while now, and he's used to all sorts of things. And Aizawa just does the frown not frown thing where he's trying not to look conflicted about something that's normal for Izuku, and he lets it go. He'd worried that the room would remind him too much of the care facility he'd been placed in, but Aizawa had actually thought of that too. The hospital bed is instantly wheeled out and a dorm room bed is brought in. The white bed sheets are replaced with dark green. Same with the pillows. And someone brings in a plant in a pot. Not a little bunch of flowers to go in the window sill, an actual potted plant, as tall as Izuku. And then they'd given him his backpack. Izuku still can't believe it, really, but they'd apparently checked the buildings and found his stuff and just brought it all back in case it had any clues to where he'd taken Aizawa. And they hadn't damaged anything. All his gofu were there, stacked and waiting, and his spare clothes and his notebooks, which they probably read, which is really embarrassing, and his little first aid kit, and his emergency blanket, and his actual woven blanket. They'd left the futon, which was probably for the best, really, and his water bottle was missing, but that's it. Now he sets up the wards all around the room. Aizawa had given him tape and said it was okay to use that on the walls, and Izuku takes him at his word. By the time he's done, his thumbs hurt a bit. Adding blood to the paper prayers makes them a lot stronger, he'd found, and every corner and wall of the room is warded. Izuku feels safe for the first time in days. Nothing has ever broken through his wards as long as they're maintained. He thinks they'll hold even against Eri's spirit. He hopes Tamomo no Mae doesn't take offense. He hasn't seen her since she helped with Misuchi. He kinda hopes the two of them are catching up, since Eri's spirit also hasn't made an appearance since last night. He crawls on the bed to rest a bit, marveling at clean sheets and soft pillows that aren't at all the hard, dense foam he remembers from the facility. And he doesn't even realize he's fallen asleep, until Aizawa knocks on the door that evening, with a plate of food and a promise to give Izuku a tour of the school now that classes are done. Touring the school is amazing, and Aizawa seems to enjoy watching Izuku flail because he never tells him to be quiet or stop talking, even as Izuku goes off on tangent after tangent about the various heroes who graduated from UA or teach here. It's actually really nice to just get to walk and talk with Aizawa and for it to be relaxed. Even as the hero points out the teacher's lounge and Nezu's office and the auditorium and the East Training Gymnasium and the West Training Grounds and where the USJ is in the distance. And Izuku's too happy to be inside UA to dwell too hard on why he'd never been able to even apply to it when he'd turned 15. Aizawa prods him gently on his not a quirk, and they set up a plan for looking after Eri, with sessions every evening after classes, because Aizawa wants to be there to supervise with the nurse, but he needs to get back to his actual job teaching 1A, of course. Izuku wants to try for more, but the look Aizawa gives him says he's going to get scolded if he suggests it. "What about Mirio?" he asks as they head back to his borrowed room. "Mirio will speak to you and we'll see how you feel after your session with Eri tomorrow, all right?" Izuku nods and yawns as Aizawa puts him to bed. "I'll be in the dorms, but the nurse next door can call me if you need me," he tells Izuku as Izuku fights to keep his eyes open. He hasn't had someone put him to bed since his mother died, and his whole chest feels warm as Aizawa tucks blankets around him with gentle hands. "I'll drop by at lunch tomorrow, all right? And we'll go shopping Sunday to get you more necessities. Try to stay out of trouble until then." Izuku manages to grin. "But then I wouldn't be problem child." "You'd be problem child even if you sat quietly in a corner all day with your hands in your lap," Aizawa tells him, but he says it with warmth and a smile in his eyes. So it makes Izuku feel good, not sad. "Just do your best." "All right," Izuku promises, and Aizawa brushes his hand through his messy hair, and it's so warm that Izuku falls asleep thinking that maybe things will actually, finally, maybe, be okay. The next few days take on a pattern, except for one thing. Mirio is totally avoiding him. Eri says that Mirio visits, but Friday passes and Izuku catches no sight of him, and Saturday he waits with his door open and still sees nothing, and he starts to think he's done something wrong when he finally hears Eri's quiet whisper of a giggle coming from her room in the late afternoon. He creeps over, and almost feels bad for not knocking, but he peeks inside and there's Eri, in Mirio's lap in the bed, the two of them reading a giant book and Mirio making animal noises. "Where is my cow? Is that my cow?" Mirio reads, expressions exaggerated. "It is a hippopotamus. That's not my cow." The line is said with such effort that Mirio's face turns red. Eri giggles all the more. Izuku decides to leave them to it, but also might decide to park himself on the floor outside of Eri's room and wait for him to emerge. He sits with his brand new notebook, legs crossed, and leans against the doorframe, and jots down everything he knows about his quirk and how it works with other quirks, and what he's been able to do. Aizawa had called it homework, and Izuku is honestly pretty excited to turn jumbled thoughts into something cohesive, especially with proper materials to do so. Aizawa had shown up the day before with handfuls of school supplies and a promise to let Izuku pick out his own on Sunday. But he wants to get started now. It's probably a solid hour before the door opens, and Mirio literally tries to creep out. Izuku looks up at him and waves. "Hi." Mirio jumps 4 feet in the air. "Ah!" Izuku scrambles to his feet. "Sorry," he says, as Mirio clutches at his chest dramatically. I really wanted to talk to you, but I didn't want to interrupt your time with Eri. She really seems to enjoy it, and she needs to relax and not worry, but I wanted to talk to you. I was worried you might be upset, and..." Mirio holds up his hands just the way Izuku does when he's trying to calm someone down, and it's so familiar Izuku stops long enough for Mirio to interject. "I'm not upset," he assures, worried but warm. "You didn't do anything wrong. I just wanted to give you time. I didn't want to pressure you or push, and, my quirks..." Mirio sags, and a hand goes behind his head to tug at the hair at the nape of his neck. "It kind of surprised me what you said before, and it's complicated." Complicated makes Izuku laugh. "Well, everything about me is complicated, and I want to help, so if you want to get your quirk back, would it be okay if I tried?" "Are you sure?" Mirio hesitates, but there's open longing in his expression. "I know you've been helping Eri, and it leaves you tired." "I'm sure." Warming up the ice field that was Eri's quirk was already easier after a day. There's already grass growing in the little space he sits in, and Izuku doesn't think reconnecting a quirk will be like repairing Eri's. They've never really taken much energy. "I want to at least try. If I think it'll take a lot, we can decide if I should keep going or if I should stop and wait." Mirio shifts from one foot to the other. "If you're sure..." Izuku gestures next door. "Do you want to do it in my room? Aizawa said you need to talk about it." Mirio nods, and the two of them troop inside. Izuku shuts the door as Mirio sits in the desk chair, and Izuku takes a moment to pull down 3 of the wards that protect the wall by the door, and the door itself. Mirio looks at him in confusion, and he holds the gofu in one hand, and Izuku flushes a bit as he sets them on the desk. "They keep your spirit out, and that'd be rude if I'm working on your quirk," he explains, moving to sit on the edge of the bed. What did Aizawa tell you about how I see things?" "That quirks manifest to you as creatures you can see and manipulate," Mirio answers easily. "Prayers keep them out." "Complicated," Izuku decides to go with, rather than explain all the details right now, even if Mirio seems really nice. "Complicated, but yeah, they listen to the ward so I don't have to worry about them. Sometimes they, get upset when I'm around because they don't like that I can see them. That's what happened the other night with Eri." Mirio nods, frowning in thought. "You told Sir they spoke to you. It must be hard hearing and seeing something no one else can." Izuku blinks. Yes? Yes, it's hard. Understatement of the year, but he's also far too surprised at Mirio just believing him. He doesn't even sound doubtful. "But there's some good things. I get to help people when their quirks don't work quite right." "Aizawa-sensei told me about the little girl you helped," Mirio enthuses, smiling brightly. "And of course Eri, and all the heroes you helped already." Izuku has to laugh at how bright Mirio is. "This is a pretty nice change from everyone thinking I'm a villain or a weird experiment." Mirio looks away at that. "I'm sorry." he offers, suddenly so sad that Izuku has to flail, palms out. You don't need to apologize. I was mostly joking. It was just a misunderstanding, and I think I would have thought the same in their place. I mean, I'm really weird. He trails off as Mirio's shoulders sag more. Sir was the one who thought that, and he's the one who told all the other heroes about you. Mirio's voice is quiet and sad. I think he would have liked to meet you properly. He'd like you once he understood. Sir finally clicks as Sir Nighteye, and Izuku thinks he might doubt the idea that the hero would trust him. But he also can't bring himself to argue with Mirio over the hero when he died to help save Eri. It's obvious Mirio liked him a lot, and might even have been there when Nighteye was killed from what Aizawa had said. I'm sorry he's gone, Izuku tells him, and means it. Even if Nighteye had frightened him, he'd still been an amazing hero. Me too, Mirio nods, but then he forces himself to smile. It doesn't reach his eyes, and he makes a fist. That's why I want to be the best hero I can be, plus ultra. I want to live up to everything he taught me. Well then, let's fix your quirk. Izuku pastes a smile on his face to match and digs out his ever-present marker. Aizawa had given him 5, all different colors. I just need to mark your hand. First, Aizawa said you recognized All Might's quirk. Izuku nods. His spirit was next to you when I finished helping Eri. At first I thought it was yours, somehow, but then I realized he was probably just looking after you. Aizawa's spirit looked after me, and you're All Might's successor, Aizawa said. Mirio's smile falters for a moment, and then he looks at the door. Aizawa said I should tell you, because you can keep secrets. Izuku blinks. Of course, I wouldn't share anything you didn't want me to, unless I thought I really had to. I mean, if it was dangerous or someone was going to get hurt. Mirio laughs awkwardly, hands behind his head. The weird thing is, Aizawa technically doesn't even know, though I guess he guessed. All Might didn't tell him. I asked, but... Mirio trails off, and Izuku waits. If Mirio wants to tell him, he can be patient, and if he changes his mind, that's okay too. Eventually, Mirio takes a breath and his smile turns into something a lot more wry and less brilliant. When Aizawa-sensei said I was All Might's successor, he was right. Izuku nods and waits. I have his quirk, he continues. I mean, he gave me his quirk. It can be passed down from hero to hero, and that's why it's a secret, because if anyone knew... You'd have all sorts of villains after you, Izuku breathes out in instant, sympathetic horror. Wow, I've never heard of a quirk like that. I mean, I wonder how it started. Do you know how many people have had it before you? I wonder if the spirit meant for that to happen originally. He never said anything when I met him before. Oh, when did All Might give you his quirk? Was it after the fight in Kamino? I know he retired after that, so... Mirio cuts him off, which is maybe good because Izuku's mind is going a mile a minute. It was before Kamino, he said, looking a bit overwhelmed at Izuku's questions, and whoops, he should probably be more careful, but at least Mirio isn't yelling. I don't know how much I should tell you. We would prefer he told you nothing at all. Mirio, All Might's spirit says, walking through the unwarded wall. We want nothing to do with you. Izuku hesitates because Mirio believes him, but Mirio also might second-guess that if he hears him just talking to thin air. I just want to fix his connection to... you. You and his other spirit. I haven't seen them yet. Because they are we and we are us. The spirit pads closer, but it at least isn't being aggressive, which isn't that much of a reassurance when it very nearly fills the front half of the room. We are one in all, and all in one. He's never met a spirit quite like this before, with a voice layered and echoing in his head. Deku, Mirio says cautiously, are you okay? Yeah, your spirit showed up. Sorry. Oh! Mirio looks around, but obviously sees nothing. Could you tell them I'm sorry about getting shot? The spirit gives the biggest sigh Izuku's ever heard, and he can't help it. He laughs. Sorry, he admits, as the spirit and Mirio both look at him. I mean, I don't think anyone thinks you got shot on purpose, Mirio. It takes some of the tension out of the room, as Mirio ducks his head and his spirit sits on the floor in front of them, tucking his legs onto his body like a big cat. Which he is, just with a lot of extras. He doesn't remember him having horns before, but maybe it just liked wearing various things like accessories. You may call me One for All, the spirit says, unaware of Izuku's mental catalog of his parts. Mirio will understand what that means. Okay. He says his name is One for All? Izuku repeats, and Mirio reels back in surprise. Did I say something wrong? No, not at all. Just, don't say that anywhere someone else can hear. It's a secret. Mirio looks a little panicked. How did you know his name? Have you seen him, your spirit, before, or All Might? It's the first time Izuku's ever met someone who knew their spirit's name. It's the name of my quirk, All Might's. One for All is the name of the quirk that gets passed down, and it's a secret. Please. Mirio looked pained. It's hard to make someone who's only just met you trust that you'll keep their secrets, but Izuku does his best. I won't say anything, I promise. I think actually from what he's saying is that, well, whatever spirit your quirk was before, it's now part of him? He looks to the lion creature, and it nods its giant head slowly. But when All Might gave you his quirk, did it take away your original quirk? It was permeation, right? Mirio frowns. My quirk got stronger, but mostly I just got All Might's strength. I was learning how to use both without using too much. But they worked fine until the bullet. Mirio looks towards the closed door thoughtful. We'd hoped maybe Eri could use her quirk to help me, but she's so afraid of her quirk, of hurting people. I don't know if she'd ever even want to try. From what Eri said to him already, Izuku can understand that. Hopefully it won't come to that. I'll try, that is, if One for All doesn't mind. Wait, does he not want to? Mirio straightens up, looks around the room. Because if he doesn't, I don't know if we should... It's Izuku's turn to be surprised and taken aback, as Mirio's worries about something that no one else before this week had ever really believed were real, besides his mom. And here Mirio is worrying about if he should get his quirk back. Said spirit sighs again heavily, and actually rolls its eyes at Mirio. Tell this child I am angry at those who created the bullets, not at him. As for you, I know what you are. Izuku sighs to echo the spirit. I'm the bridge, yes, but I really haven't earned any of the other names everyone calls me. I really don't want to hurt you or take your power or anything like that. I told Mizuchi the same thing. I tell everyone. I want to help humans, and I help spirits who ask me, that's it. One for All snorts and smoke trails from his nose. Izuku wonders if he can breathe fire as well. He really wants to ask what kind of spirit he is, but this really isn't the time or place for it. That remains to be seen. You are young. Age makes monsters out of men. Izuku doesn't mean to get upset. He really doesn't, but it's just not fair. Don't you think treating me like I'm some villain and beating me up and calling me names all the time might maybe be a self-fulfilling prophecy? Why does everyone think that I'm just going to rip out your names and use you when I did it once to one spirit when I didn't know what I was doing, and any other time it's been in self-defense, and I never keep anyone for myself? It's just... ugh! His hands fists in his bedspread, and then he remembers Mirio is watching him, and gods he's making a fool of himself. And Izuku covers his face with his hands for a moment and just breathes deeply. You know what? Never mind. Never mind. Mirio, he isn't angry at you. One for All, I just need to know if you'll let me fix this. Are you okay? Mirio asks gently. Spirits don't like me, Izuku tells him without any energy to try to soften the fact. He rubs at his forehead and around his temples because it lets go of some of the tension there. They usually assume I'm just going to try to enslave them, and it's a thing. I'm fine. He had two spirits, one after another, Tamomonome and Nosagi, be kind to him and understand that he just wanted to help. Apparently that was going to be his max for the foreseeable future. He just needs to say if he's going to fight me. Why? You can force me even if I say no. Would you withhold his power from him? Oh, Izuku bites at his palm, so he doesn't scream. It helps him sound sane and stable when he snaps out a reply. Yes, in fact, Mirio, if your quirk didn't want to come back, would you expect me to force it? Mirio recoils back from him. Of course not. Why would I do that? Yeah, me neither, and yet we're having this conversation. Izuku glares at One for All. So yes, no, or say if you need more time and we'll wait. The scorpion tail flicks back and forth like a cat's, but Izuku is too tired of this to be intimidated. He stares and waits, and the spirit stares and waits, and finally, it's the one to look away. Fix us, if you can. Not the most glowing of acceptances, but he'll take it. Izuku gestures to Mirio for his hand. Okay, you stop sulking, he says, which makes the spirit bristle, and Mirio grins so Izuku takes it as a win. Let's see what we can do. It's okay if it doesn't work, Mirio assures, even though Izuku can tell it would be very much not okay. He appreciates how hard Mirio is trying for his sake. I'm going to do my best, Izuku promises him, as he adds a sigil to his own hand. He's done this more in the last few months than he's done in the previous 12. It's actually nice being able to do something good for people with what he can do. He closes his eyes and reaches out toward the connection with Mirio and his disconnected power. Fields of wheat, shelves of books, deep black oceans, and mazes of tall, dead hedges. Izuku's seen all sorts of echoes of a person's self. This is the first time he's looked at someone's core and felt like his face was about to melt off. He rocks back into himself, blinking sunspots from his eyes that aren't really there but somehow are at the same time. Ouch. What happened? Mirio's instantly leaning in, looking him over and worried. Are you okay? Did something attack you? Izuku almost wants to hug Mirio, or at least give him something really nice for the fact that he's the first person to take Izuku's explanations at face value like this. Instead, he shakes his head and drags up a smile. No, I'm okay. Your power just, surprised me. You're very bright. Bright? It felt like looking into the sun, Izuku admits. He has no idea why Mirio laughs so hard, but he accepts the invitation out to dinner later with Mirio and his classmates, including Sun Eater, when Mirio promises he'll understand better to meet them. Reaching back, he is better prepared for the intensity this time, and can find the looming darkness that seems to separate Mirio's bright light and his spirit's power. And what power! Mirio's brilliant as a sun, but One for All feels like Izuku's discovered a supernova. He can't even imagine trying to tap into that power for himself, even if he wanted to. He thinks he'd melt. When he comes back into himself, properly for the second time, after clearing away the darkness and ensuring that Mirio's spirit is properly tethered to his human, new or otherwise, Izuku opens his eyes and instantly slaps his hands over them. Your clothes, he tells Mirio, feeling his face heat up. Mirio's laughing, though, phased halfway through the chair and whooping with joy, and Izuku can't help but laugh as well. Aizawa, true to his word, takes Izuku shopping on Sunday. It passes in a bit of a blur. The initial plan of going to a mall works for 2 stores before Izuku's constantly being tripped, pushed, or knocked around. There's just too many people, which means too many spirits, and if he apologizes to Aizawa one more time, he thinks the man might actually yell at him for it. Instead, Aizawa takes them outside with what purchases they had managed. Some t-shirts, some track pants, some shorts because it's still hot, plus socks and underwear. Izuku does not want to admit he's the most excited about the new socks and underwear. They move to smaller stores after that, though, and Aizawa has to call someone to ask for advice on where to go, and then Aizawa uses his quirk, just randomly and aimed at no one in specific. Aizawa? Izuku asks, looking around in confusion. She show up yet? He replies, and Izuku realizes he's calling for Tamamo no Mae. A moment later, she does appear, in her fox form, and she looks up at Aizawa and then to Izuku curiously. She's here, Izuku tells the man. Good. Can she keep the spirits around you from bugging you while we shop? That's not... She's not, Izuku starts, because this is not what spirits do, and Aizawa could at least ask nicely. Tell him I will watch out for you, Tamamo no Mae laughs. Though if you avoid more crowded areas, that would help. I can feel the ire directed at you from here, and even I have my limits. Izuku relays the information, and Aizawa just nods at where Izuku had been looking. Good. Thanks. Let's go. Izashi says there's some shops down the street that should be quieter. Quieter is still busy for a city so close to Tokyo, but it's better than a mall, and Izuku finds himself with new shoes and a new backpack, more stationery and notebooks, toiletries so he isn't using tiny sample ones from midnight, and then Aizawa takes him to a cell phone dealer, and Izuku panics. You don't need to, he says, flailing a bit. I have a phone. I just, a SIM card. I usually only use it for Wi-Fi at hotspots because it doesn't have a connection. Aizawa gives him the most dismissive look Izuku's seen from him. The phone with a crack through the screen. That one? It mostly works. Izuku tries. That doesn't work. At least, he tells himself, Aizawa's buying one of the lower-end, less expensive phones, and it isn't on contract. At least Aizawa knows better than to plan for Izuku staying forever, because, well, what if things change? What if the spirits get too annoying and they can't deal with him? What if Hitoshi doesn't like sharing his parents? Izuku wants this, but he's also going to be realistic. It's better to plan for when things go wrong, so that he can land on his feet and keep going. He doesn't want to cause anyone trouble. He doesn't want to be a bother. He doesn't want Aizawa to regret giving him even this much. Yamada, too, has a surprise for him when they get back to UA, just in time to do another session with Eri, whose quirk is improving in leaps and bounds. The teacher's dressed in casual clothes with his hair tied back, and in a comfortable-looking long-sleeved shirt, holding a box that he pushes into Izuku's hands the minute they appear in the corridor. "There you are," he says, and Izuku's already gotten used to the volume that Yamada speaks in. "Shota here asked me to run my own errand for you while you two are out. There you go. Let me know if anything doesn't work. I got a jet. It's game night with Namuri and Sekijiro, and they're going to eat all the snacks if I'm late." Izuku stares down at the box as Yamada pats Aizawa on the shoulder and dashes off down the hall. It's a laptop. It's a laptop. They are giving him a laptop. Aizawa sighs. "It's only logical problem, child. Now don't cry. We need something for you to do your schoolwork on." On Tuesday, Izuku gets called to Mr. Principal's office for some testing, which Aizawa had assured him was just a way to see where Izuku stood on standardized levels, so that they knew where to start with getting him back up to speed. Izuku's not sure it's worth it. He's probably way too far behind to ever qualify for UA, even with help. But he can't say he doesn't want it. He technically had online schooling once he'd been put in the facility, and when he'd escaped, they'd never deactivated his account. He'd tried to spend as much time as he could in the library working on assignments, trying to keep up on the off chance that he'd maybe one day be able to get off the streets and get a proper job somewhere. Math had been the hardest, but he'd actually liked most subjects, and the librarians never bothered him when they saw what he was working on. He has no idea if it's going to be of any help, but all he can do is try his best, and he does. There's written tests, those are familiar, and oral tests. Izuku's English isn't very good, he knows. And then Mr. Principal asks him questions about spirits, questions about quirks, questions about heroes, questions about hero laws and vigilantes, and All Might's rise in the hero scoring system, and meal plans, and what the economy at Kotobukicho had been like compared to Minami Ward, and Izuku's head is spinning by the time he's done. And then the clock reads well past 4. Class is out for the day. "Good work," Principal Nezu says, his dark eyes so sharp in his small face. Above him is his quirk that he'd asked Izuku about, a giant burning mandala that had said nothing the entire time, even when Izuku had greeted it. Intimidating, but after meeting Mizuchi and One for All, not nearly as intimidating as it could be. The principal dismisses Izuku without any real indication of how well he's done and sends him off to meet with Aizawa. He's glad that the hallways are empty. Izuku's tried to avoid anywhere where the students might be because their spirits sometimes like to just get in the way, and he doesn't want to look even stranger than he already must. The weird kid with a visitor's badge around a lanyard on his neck. Not even in any uniform. Thankfully, he's been able to hide in his room when class is in session, and he and Eri have lunch together, brought up to them by a teacher so he can avoid the cafeteria. He really hasn't needed to cross paths with anyone much, and so he's relaxed as he heads back from Nezu's office, lost in thought as he makes his way towards the teacher's lounge. He's very nearly there when a voice shouts out, "Deku!" He turns and is faced with a taller blonde boy with a scowl on his face, a sloppy uniform, and a vaguely familiar-looking spirit. One Izuku thinks he's seen in passing, at least, though that doesn't say much. "Hey, Deku, what the fuck?" The last word is emphasized by a small explosion in the other boy's hands, flaring loud and bright but brief. Some sort of explosive quirk. Izuku doesn't remember seeing that in the sports festival, but maybe the student had to abstain. He backs up as the other boy storms closer, and Izuku has to duck and dodge away as the blonde tries to pin him against the wall. "What are you doing?" Izuku has to ask, flabbergasted. He's been in the school for days. Everyone should know that he's no longer a person of interest by now. "Did you not get the memo? Aizawa brought me here." "What the hell do you think you're even doing here, shitty Deku?" The explosions pop off again, and Izuku tries to dodge from the hands, but the other boy is fast and trained. He catches him and slams Izuku against the wall hard. One hand stays balled in his shirt, the other sparks dangerously close to his face. The boy's spirit, surprisingly, keeps its distance. "I don't know what the fuck you think you were doing getting involved with villains," the boy growls with a voice like gravel. "I knew you were a desperate idiot, but I didn't think you'd be that desperate." Izuku stares into blood-red eyes and tries to think about who he might be able to call on to help right now. He takes a chance, feeling guilty as he does so, and tugs on the name Tamamo no Mae. To the boy in front of him, he says, "Who are you exactly?" He does not expect the punch, which he really probably should have braced for. He's no stranger to fights. There were plenty of bullies growing up, and in the spirits, and then being a skinny homeless kid without a gang or any real affiliation. He ought to know he's dealing with someone violent when they advertise it this loudly, but he's gotten soft, staying in the school with Aizawa and his family. He is going to have to be careful about that going forward. For now, Izuku picks himself up. He doesn't get far before there's a hand on his shoulder, peppering it with tiny burns. It's burning through his shirt, his new shirt that Aizawa bought for him. It had been a gift, and this bully is burning it. Tamamo no Mae appears in that instant, and Izuku's so furious that he barely uses words. Later he'll realize that they did something in seconds that usually takes him far longer. But he reaches out, and she accepts, and the burning stops. The snap and crackle of explosions stop, and the blonde asshole kid steps back in shock and horror. "What the fuck did you do?" "You're using your quirk on a civilian in your school, unlawfully in front of the teacher's lounge against someone who can manipulate quirks." Izuku spits out each word as he checks his shirt for damage, more dismayed by the pockmarked holes than the blisters on his skin. "What do you think I did? Are you stupid?" Izuku wonders why the teachers haven't appeared yet. They have to be hearing this. Are they actually like his old school, where student fighting wasn't their problem after school hours? "Because this seems really stupid." The blonde screams, and it's guttural and full of rage, and both frightening and, if Izuku had to admit, a little pathetic. It's a bit like watching a toddler throw a fit, just scaled up, except then the blonde throws himself forward, and while Izuku's got a basic knowledge of hard knocks and a borrowed power that lets him stop quirks, he sure as hell can't hold his own against someone actually trained to do harm. He goes down hard, and the boy gets another punch in, screaming about all for one and quirks, fist crashing into Izuku's cheek so hard he tastes blood. Izuku's ready to call in something bigger for help and burn a favor for it. But before he can, the boy is yanked back suddenly, his weight flying away from Izuku's chest so that Izuku can scramble back to try to get away. The other boy is wrapped in Aizawa's capture cloth, fighting back even as the fabric tightens around him. Aizawa's looming over them both, quirk activated and expression furious, and Izuku suddenly can't breathe all over again because he is in trouble. He's going to get kicked out. It was always his fault when a fight happened, always. Aizawa shakes the boy in his grip. "Bakugo," he intones in cold fury. "What the fuck do you think you're doing?" "Sensei!" The blonde, "Okay, Bakugo," Izuku files that away, stops struggling. "Deku's quirkless, or he was when we were kids. His quirk now has to come from him." His eyes are wide, and Izuku realizes, now that he's not, fighting him off, that this Bakugo doesn't look entirely well. He's sweating, for one thing, and his face is pale. "He's working with them." Oh, so this is the villain thing again. Somehow, though. "I don't know who you are," he admits, and then wonders if he should. His memory's full of holes for a reason. "Like fuck you forgot," Bakugo starts. "How do you know Deku?" Aizawa says before Bakugo can continue. Still furious, Izuku realizes the door to the teacher's lounge is open a crack. They're probably all pressed to it listening in. "He was a shitty quirkless kid who followed me around for fucking years, crying every time he stubbed his toe," Bakugo shouts. Izuku thinks he might be a bit like Yamada, just always set to top volume. "He fucking called me Kachan." Then he sneers at Izuku, not seeing the way Aizawa goes stiff at the revelation. "Who the fuck do you think gave you the name Shitty Deku?" "Wait," Izuku gets up. "You're the one who gave me a terrible nickname, and you're the one who's upset I forgot about you. You're really full of yourself." That sets Bakugo off again, even while still wrapped in Aizawa's weapon. Aizawa has to flare his quirk once more, and his next sentence strikes Bakugo dead still and horrified. "This is grounds for expulsion, Katsuki." Bakugo Katsuki? Katsuki Bakugo? Izuku will ask later. Gapes like a fish. Izuku actually feels bad for him, even while rubbing at his bruised jaw. At least he can see Recover Girl for this, instead of just waiting for it to heal up or spending another favor with Sahira. "Sensei," Bakugo pleads, but he doesn't seem to know what to say. Typical, Izuku thinks. The few times anyone had ever confronted bullies for him, they'd never known what to say back about that besides fuck off or mind your own business. And this clearly is Aizawa's business. Still. What would expelling him prove? Izuku asks as he runs his tongue over his teeth on the inside of his cheek. Aizawa and Bakugo both look at him, and Izuku shrugs, even if the motion hurts. I mean, I guess if he's done this a lot before and you've talked to him, I don't know, but I thought UA was supposed to teach you to be better, not to... He looks at the wide-eyed kid. Not throw a whole person out even if they're actually jerks? Deku! Bakugo snaps, but it doesn't have as much force to it. I don't need your shitty help. While he's arguing that I shouldn't expel you. And at least Aizawa no longer sounds like he's about to erupt. He also starts to relax the capture weapon, and Bakugo's smart enough not to launch at Izuku again. Do you know Deku's name? Bakugo sputters for a moment, rolling his eyes. Of course I know the idiot's name, it's... And he stops, making a face, and then staring at Izuku. Why the fuck can't I remember it? I know it's on the tip of my tongue, but I just can't... Ugh! Explosions pop from his hands, though clearly just as emphasis, not as a threat. Did you do this? He glares at Izuku, demanding. You did this, he declares, almost instantly afterwards. Izuku has to laugh, because of course he comes across an old bully. He knew him before, and of course it would be all his fault. Aizawa maybe sees that the laughter isn't exactly a happy sort, because he puts a hand on Bakugo's shoulder and turns him around to face him directly, while Izuku tries to collect himself. You're under house arrest for attacking a guest and using your quirk offensively. We will be talking about this. I want you to write an essay on Mitchell's treatise on quirk rarity and include 3 current quirks that do not fit on that scale, and extrapolate how they might evolve through the next generation. Due Friday. Bakugo seems to know when he's lost. He stares at the ground, hands jammed into the pockets of his baggy pants. Yes, Sensei. And you're benched from all hero training for a week, Aizawa adds, which is probably an insult to injury. Bakugo starts, but then just hunkers down more. Yes, Sensei. Go to the dorms. We'll talk later, Aizawa directs and nudges Bakugo out and along the hall. He waits until he disappears before coming up to Izuku, apologetic. Are you all right? He burnt the shirt you bought me, Izuku points out, but he's a little calmer about it now. He seemed beyond the knowing me part. He was afraid? Aizawa gives him a long look, lips pressed in a thin line. Do you remember helping rescue him from the League of Villains? No. Izuku frowns, then puts 2 and 2 together, considering the timing. Oh, wow, I guess he was the memory I gave up to get us home. He wonders if Aizawa remembers what he'd said. Probably, based on the way Aizawa looks sad and sympathetic, and angry all at once. Aizawa shakes his head, clearly bothered by this. I think so. Izuku reaches up and pats him on the arm, in an awkward sympathy. It's okay, he reassures him, because obviously he'd been right to give that up to get them back in one piece. It was worth it. All right, listeners, this concludes Chapter 10 of Complicated Creation. Chapter 11 will be up next. Just a few more chapters to go in this fic. I hope you all are still enjoying this one. Let me know your thoughts and reactions to the rest of Chapter 10 here, and as always, thank you all so much for listening.